After the Battle of San Jacinto in April 1836, Mexican President Santa Anna was forced to sign a peace treaty recognizing the independence of Texas. The defeat of his army, and the loss of Texas, was a national humiliation for Mexico. The centralist government in Mexico City never accepted the treaty. Santa Anna renounced the agreement as soon as he returned to Mexico. The Mexican government never recognized the independence of the Republic of Texas, so the two countries remained effectively at war for the next 10 years.
We welcome Stephen F. Austin and the other Americanos to settle in Texas. We gave the colonists everything: generous land grants, trade with Mexican ports. All we ever asked, was that they become loyal and true citizens of Mexico. But they never did, and in time decided to overthrow the rightful government of Mexico, to take all we had given them and claim it as their own. And then it was more territory and more land that threatened our entire northern frontier. The Republic of Mexico could never allow that.
The 4 small schooners that formed the Texas Navy during the Revolution had all been lost by the fall of 1837. This left Texas completely unprotected by sea, and coastal communities like Galveston, Velasco, and Matagorda felt especially vulnerable to invasion by sea from Mexico. Beginning in late 1838, the Republic of Texas began rebuilding its navy bigger than before. The new fleet consisted of a ship-rigged sloop of war as the largest ship, Austin, 2 brigs, Archer and Wharton, and 3 schooners, San Bernard, San Antonio, and San Jacinto, and a large steamship, Zavala. Because this larger squadron was established more than a year after the loss of all 4 of the Navy's original ships, this force is sometimes called the Second Texas Navy. To lead this new Texian Navy, the Republic appointed a former U.S. naval officer, Edwin Moore.
The Texas government built these ships, but did not provide the money for crews, maintenance, or supplies. You can't just put the Navy away in a warehouse until you need it. A Navy is expensive, but necessary. When I commanded the Texas Navy, I built alliances with the rebels in the south of Mexico, at the other end of the Gulf, to help them in their fight against the centralist government in Mexico City. We had a common enemy. In this way, we protected Texas, took the fight away from the Texas coast, and were able to keep the Navy active and afloat.
Moore and his little squadron of ships captured Mexican shipping along the coast of the Mexican states of Yucatan and Tabasco, helped capture the city of San Juan Bautista for the rebels, and generally kept the Mexican Navy busy, away from Texas. When he wasn't patrolling in the southern Gulf of Mexico, Moore stayed busy mapping the Texas coast, preparing the most accurate charts of the coastline produced to that time. Moore's new, more accurate maps helped increase shipping business between Texas, New Orleans, and other ports.
President Lamar understood the Navy. He supported it and did what he could to encourage the fleet. He saw the future of the Republic as a major nation on the North American continent, reaching as far north as Wyoming and possibly all the way to the Pacific Ocean. He sought to expand the boundaries of Texas through trade and military expeditions. He encouraged the Navy to take the fight to Mexico, to fight them there, so we didn't have to fight them here.
It is the destiny of Texas to become the major power on the continent. My administration worked to build trade and settlement on the frontier, into Santa Fe and New Mexico and beyond. One day we might see the Lone Star flag spread across the continent all the way to the Pacific. Not long after I left office, a newspaper editor named John O'Sullivan said the United States should expand its borders by annexing Texas. He said it was the United States' manifest destiny to do so, meaning that it was obvious to everyone, manifest, that it was God's intended and absolute plan. the United States' destiny to rule the entire continent of North America. He had the right idea, but I saw it as Texas' destiny.
But the situation in Texas changed dramatically in late 1841 when Sam Houston succeeded Lamar as president. Houston was focused on bringing Texas into the United States and saw the continual fighting with Mexico on both land and sea to be a barrier to that. Commodore Moore and the Texian Navy posed a particular challenge to Houston's grand strategy by conducting operations hundreds of miles from the Texas coast, beyond the president's direct control, and actively aiding the rebels in Yucatan. Eventually, Houston even proclaimed that Moore and his officers were pirates, to be hunted down and captured by the civilized nations of the world.
I, Sam Houston, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navies of the Republic of Texas, do declare and proclaim the aforesaid Post Captain E.W. Moore to be suspended of all command in the Navy of the Republic. I do further declare and proclaim that this government will not hold itself responsible for his acts on the high seas, but would ask and request of governments to seize the aforesaid E.W. Moore, the ship Austin, the brig Wharton, and their crews, and bring them to the port of Galveston. The naval powers of Christendom will not permit the flagrant and unexampled outrage that would destroy all civil rule and jeopardize the commerce of the ocean and render encouragement and sanction to piracy.
Houston sent commissioners to New Orleans, where Commodore Moore was resupplying his ships, to bring the squadron back to Galveston to be disbanded and the ships sold. Moore, who knew that the Mexican Navy was quickly rearming and had recently obtained 2 steam-powered warships, convinced the commissioners he would return to Galveston by way of Yucatan, and they sailed in the spring of 1843.
I signed aboard the flagship Austin at New Orleans in February 1843. Being only 15, I was rated as a ship's boy, but with pay at $12 a month, the same as a Marine private. I spent the next few weeks learning my way around the ship and doing all the chores and jobs on board. When we sailed with Commodore Moore for Yucatan in April, I thought I was already a right proper seaman, or nearly so.
Moore's squadron arrived off Yucatan at the end of April, where he learned that the 2 Mexican steamships, Guadalupe and Montezuma, were blocking access to the ports controlled by the rebels.
The Mexican Navy had 2 large steamships against our smaller sailing ships. Their officers and most of their crews were British too. Facing them in battle would be a challenge. Their steamships could go wherever they wanted, while ours relied entirely on the wind. They also had heavy guns that fired shells that exploded, while most of our guns fired ordinary, solid iron cannonballs. Their ships were new and built in England, and so were of good quality, while ours were worn from years of hard service.
The 2 squadrons met in May 1843 off the coast of Yucatan, in what became known as the Battle of Campeche. The Texian fleet consisted of the sailing ships Austin and Wharton, while the Mexican squadron formed around Guadalupe and Montezuma. Both squadrons were accompanied by a flotilla of smaller schooners.
A little after 10, the Mexican ships got up steam and came down toward us. We sent the men to battle stations and hoisted flags all over both ships. Just before 11, Guadalupe opened fire with those big 68-pounder guns. Those 68-pound balls are tremendous missiles, and the way they would whistle and hum over our heads, well, it was a caution, I tell you.
My job in action was to carry gunpowder cartridges for the cannons up from the storage in the bottom of the ship. At one point I was running forward, and just before I got to the number 6 gun, a cannonball from one of the Mexican ships came through the netting over the gun. It took off part of one sailor's foot, wounded 2 more men and bounced off the steerage hatch before passing through the number 7 gun port on the opposite side of the ship. It was bad. Really bad. It was on my next trip carrying a fresh gunpowder. I don't remember much after that.
A little after noon, the breeze came up and Moore steered his 2 sailing ships between the Mexican steamers, Austin leading with Wharton following a quarter-mile behind. The gunfire continued for 3 more hours, until by mid-afternoon the crews on both sides were exhausted. The Mexican ships, damaged and running low on ammunition, withdrew, and Moore's battered ships were in no shape to chase them. Austin had fired 530 cannon shots, and Wharton had fired 65. Austin had been hit a dozen times by Mexican shells, almost all by the 68-pounders. Austin's rigging was shot to pieces, and the decks covered with splintered wood, sand, blood, and smashed equipment. 3 men on Austin were killed, with another 21 wounded, some terribly, like Thomas Barnett. 1 man was killed on Wharton. Casualties on the Mexican ships are uncertain, but they were believed to have lost around 50 men killed, and at least as many wounded. Both sides claimed victory, but the Mexican warships never returned to fight the Texians. Mexico sold both their steamships back to Britain. After the Texian squadron returned from the Battle of Campeche in the summer of 1843, Houston ordered the ships to be put in storage at Galveston, the officers and crews dismissed, and the remaining Navy supplies and equipment to be sold off at auction. Moore was court-martialed on charges of mishandling government money and disobedience to orders. He was acquitted and found not guilty on most of the charges, but it was the end of the Texas Navy as a fighting force. The remaining ships and supplies were transferred to the U.S. Navy after Texas was annexed and became a state. Commodore Moore's alliances with the rebels in Yucatan and the Battle of Campeche ended with his getting fired and the disbanding of the Texas Navy, but the larger battle had been won. Under Moore, the Navy helped shift the conflict between Texas and Mexico to other places, to other battles, and in doing so, helped save the Texas Republic from a major invasion. The Navy helped Texas gain international recognition as a growing regional power. Its aggressive action helped keep the Mexican government on the defensive. In these ways, Commodore Moore and the Texas Navy helped to save the Republic, so that it survived to become part of the United States.